What's up, rockers? Welcome to another episode of the Talk Louder podcast, where we geek out on all things rock and roll. Hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Leave us your likes and comments. You can also leave likes and comments on our Facebook page. Follow us on iTunes, Spotify, Instagram, and our website, talklouderpodcast.com, where you'll find links to our merch and all of our previous episodes. I'm Metal Dave, along with my co-host Jason McMaster. And today we are joined by LA Guns guitarist Ace Von Johnson, who just got back from a video shoot. LA Guns has a new album coming out in April. It's called Black Diamonds. They recently shot two videos, one for a song called Shattered Glass, and the other, I think, is the title track. Yeah. So not sure when they'll be coming out, but the videos are in the can, so I would expect to see them sooner than later. You can keep an eye out for that. New album coming in April, a tour to follow. Of course, Ace was previously in Faster Pussycat. He's got a vast punk rock background. We get into all that today on the show. And man, he was a lot of fun to talk to.
I love this guy. Inadvertently, we have been shoved into shuttle vans and cruise buffet lines, and I've stood next to Ace Von Johnson 100 times, and we're not close or anything, but it's like, hey dude, so it was just cool to kind of meet the man.
Yeah. So. And he's a total nerd just like us, and more than just music. He's a horror movie freak. He's a pit bull advocate. Vast musical knowledge. So we just had a great time geeking out with him today for sure.
Yeah, he was awesome. And it's interesting. We didn't talk about his guitar collection. He has one.
Yeah, that's the thing.
He's a nerd. So he's he has two guitars. You know what I mean? It's going to be, so we need to do a part 2 with this guy. I think that, he has a lot more to say.
Yeah, and that was the beauty of it. I think we touched on a lot of current events and music and timely news related to LA Guns, but we were sort of off and running, and things like that just disappeared in the conversation. So hopefully we'll have him back at some point. He was a great guest, lots to talk about, and we didn't even scratch the surface, I don't think. But we'll bring him in, Ace Von Johnson, today on the Talk Louder podcast.
Hey, got a name.
What's up?
There he is, man. What's up, Ace?
Oh, man, we're down the highway. Got that Ace Von Johnson passing by.
What's up, Dave? What's up, Jason? How are you guys?
Good, man. How are you? How are the dogs?
They're good. They're inherently going to be a distraction at some point during this, so I apologize in advance.
We welcome that.
We've had pets on the show plenty of times. Cats walking across desktops and climbing over shoulders, and we've had kids come in and out of episodes. So we're used to it. No big deal. Thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for
dog bones and sippy cups.
I don't have a sippy cup, but I have a coffee cup.
Okay.
Yeah.
And a couple of.
I was just seeing how you like the name of my new band.
Oh no, I'm pre-ordering the record already.
Dog bones and sippy cups.
I'm in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of, that's probably somewhere lodged in the back of my one brain cell. There was a band for many years that turned into another band called Pitbull Daycare. So,
I heard the name.
Dog bones and sippy cups, kind of. Anyway.
Yeah. I wrote an article on them for Metal Edge magazine back when they were still around.
Oh wow.
Yeah, those guys. The band is made up of a bunch of San Antonio guys. I'm originally from San Antonio, and Jason, of course, has long history in San Antonio. There we go.
This is the see, when you say Pitbull Daycare, people think of something else, and this is my Pitbull Daycare.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, which one is that? What are the names here?
Okay, so this is Willow. She's a puppy. She's my foster that I'm probably going to fail on and keep. And then the gray and white one right there, that's Mila. That's my main bitch. I've had her for 9+ years. And then you can see Rufus's butt over there with the flannel on. He's drooling into a pillow that he's sleeping on right now. So this is my trilogy of terror here.
Right on. Ace Von Johnson's Kennels, right here on the Talk Louder podcast. I love it.
I like the purple patent leather.
Oh yeah. So this is actually part of my stage ensemble.
That's attractive.
They're all color coded. I hate that my OCD is so obvious and blatant, but Willow's purple and sometimes pink, Mila's pink and something else, and then Rufus is like gray and black or something. I don't know. They all have little outfits and accoutrement that they wear, and everyone's color.
You're making the doctor diagnosis be fun.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, at least my crazy's a fun kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Well,
we've had guests confess that exact. We've had that. It was Johnny. Johnny Martin. He talked to us about. He was an open book.
Yeah.
He always is.
Yeah.
That's the best way to be. That's hard for some people to be that way. So
I love him. He was hilarious on the show, and he's always great in person. I can't imagine what it's like traveling with that guy. And
I can.
It's interesting. I love Johnny. Johnny's the guy I've known the longest. I think I met, I'm 40 now. So I met Johnny when I was maybe like 21 or 22.
Wow.
And so we go back a good 18 years and whatnot. So he's fun to hang out with. We always talk about punk rock and he's always very like, how's my hair? Does this look, how does this look? What do you think of this turtleneck? And I'm like, oh, I don't know, dude.
Yeah. He had a brand new haircut. He was sporting the current haircut when he was on our show, but at the time it was brand new. So it was sort of that Vapors sort of,
Oh yeah.
The razored on top and kind of mullet in the back and everything. It looks amazing.
Yeah, it's a mullet.
yeah. But it's a good looking mullet.
Yeah, he pulls all that off. He's got arguably the best hair in any band I've been in 20 years.
Johnny and I've known Johnny since he played for Jesse Malin. That's where I met him. And he was here in Austin for South by Southwest one year, and I'm a Jesse Malin fan, D-Generation, all that stuff. So I went to go see him play, and I'd seen Jesse a few times prior to Johnny being in the band. So whenever Jesse comes through town, I go see him. Well, this particular time I go, and Johnny's on bass, Todd Youth is on guitar, and I got to talking to Johnny after the show, and he was like, "Hey, give me your phone number. I'll stay in touch." And I was thinking, yeah, sure, dude. Okay, whatever. So I gave him my phone number thinking he's not going to stay in touch.
He started calling you that night?
Not quite, but we've been friends ever since. And that's been 10, 11, 12 years or something like that. And
at least
he always sends me goofy stuff on, text messages and I don't know if I should say this, but I will. He also leaks me LA Guns tracks before they're available to the
Hey, we're recording right now, Dave, so be careful with your
I think Johnny and Phil and Tracy know that anything that Johnny leaks to me is in good hands until it's...
Well, you're just a test market, Dave. That's all.
Yeah, that's what I think it is.
Yeah.
So, let's dumb it down a little bit. We all think that you're badass. That's great, but you're just a test market. They find people with hair like yours.
Yeah.
So let's see what this guy thinks. See if he'd buy the record.
He has the right hair.
You're the demographic we're after.
Yeah, certainly age-wise, excepting you, of course. If you just turned 40, my God. Jason and I are reminded from time to time how old we are when we do this show.
I think that's me reminding us.
Yes. Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
But you guys are 43 and 42, right?
I've started my cane collection.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You have one that pulls out into a dagger, though.
Yeah.
Of course I do.
5 of those.
I actually have an opium pipe that does that.
Awesome.
Color coordinated.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a prop. Wink.
Yeah.
Wink. It is just a prop.
I like it.
So, Ace, tell us, if I'm not mistaken, you are freshly returned from an LA Guns video shoot. Is that correct?
Yeah, we did a twofer over what's today, Friday. We did 2 back-to-back, Saturday, Sunday, in some locations there in the Los Angeles area. for two of the upcoming four singles for the new record for Black Diamonds. I'm trying to think what they were called. One was called Shattered Glass, and then the other one was the title track for the album. So,
Which is what?
Black Diamonds.
Tell all the kids. Make sure we are.
Black Diamonds.
That's the first thing I thought of when I heard the name of the album.
That's what I was like. Are we doing a Kiss cover? Because if we're going to do one, I would pick. I'm okay with that one. I'm being gnawed upon down here by a small puppy. So if you hear any weird
No, that's fine.
I thought that was my stomach.
I thought it was farts.
I thought it was from all this coffee I'm drinking. I'm ready to go already.
Yeah, it's farts.
Yeah, it does sound like farts. Yeah, so, ow.
Others will follow the city.
So, Black Diamond.
Record.
Excited about it.
Yeah, this is my second official full length with the band, although I'm pictured on a third one, and then I have the live album. So I guess if you call a live album, this will be my third LP with the band in 5 years. Ow, dude!
Yeah, good.
And it's this sharp little pointy teeth, and then an EP as well, and then a bevy of singles. So in 5 years we're cranking them out. Really just turning out new stuff. So it's great to be in a band that's putting out music all the time. I love that because I've been in some other bands, Pussycat included, where 5, 10, 12, 15, 100 years will go by, and you're like, yeah, we're not gonna really do anything. So nice change of pace for me, and whatnot. And that's it. New record.
Yeah,
Awesome.
LA Guns, like you said, has been extremely prolific. I remember just being excited that Phil and Tracy were reuniting for the Missing Piece record. And then when it came out, I loved it, man. I thought it was so good.
Yeah.
And then in the back of my mind, I couldn't help but wonder, are these guys going to be able to keep it together because they have a history of some contention and that sort of thing. And not only are the two of them, keeping it together and continuing to work together, but you guys are cranking out albums one after another, and they're all solid. I think you guys have not only been really prolific in really years, or in recent years, but you're putting out really quality stuff too. So that's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I always try to approach it with sort of an outsider's opinion, because even though I'm a band member, despite what the internet might want to say about it, you're just a hired gun. Okay, I know I wasn't there in 1987. I'm very aware of that. But
Wow.
as I'm in my fifth year with the band, I always try to take an outside opinion with the whole, respecting the legacy. What am I thinking of these things? Not as a band member or a guy that's working with these people, but like, how does this align with sort of the legacy and the other material? And I think it's really, I think the band is continuing to deliver really solid release after release. Nothing to do with me, I just work here, but I'm proud of being involved. I'm proud of the records that the band is putting out collectively. And in that same sort of mindset, being in a room with Tracy and Phil, 3-4 months out of the year, I see the little snipes on the internet and whatnot, but it's like, I'm in a room with these guys and they're really fucking close. I had about 4 hours with Tracy the other day, just the two of us. And then Phil and I on Saturday went out for a cocktail after the video shoot. And, I think it's one of those things where like what's in the past is in the past. And these two working together is really sort of like, I think you use the word prolific. And so, they're the term that they both used endearingly is Cain and Abel. And so, they're very yin and yang, but they're still part of that circle. And I love it. I love them both. I love working with them. And it's really unique getting to watch them work together and then get on stage. And then, I look to my left and I'm like, holy shit, that's Tracy and Phil, so it's a cool thing.
Yeah, Johnny pretty much said the same thing when we had him on the show. He said all the past arguments or whatever, for lack of a better word, between Phil and Tracy are just that, a thing of the past, but people won't let it go. And Johnny was saying the internet makes more of it than it really is. Cause like you, he's with those guys all the time. And he says the chemistry is better than it's ever been, and they get along just fine. And, it is work. So there's going to be, discussions and debates and that sort of thing. But it's all healthy. It's nothing detrimental.
I would say in 5 years, I think there's been maybe 1 or 2 instances where I was like, okay, mom and dad are fighting right now. But I mean, in 5 years, I mean, Jason, you're in a bunch of bands, we all, there's going to be a time where you're like, I don't like that, or I don't like your attitude, or why'd you drink so much today, or whatever the fuck it is. That's right. Every band. I don't even know how many bands I've been in anymore, 50, and this may be the healthiest environment I've ever been in, jokes aside. So when people, the little, loudmouths online have their opinions, I'm like, well, you can think whatever you want, but it's not 1991 anymore or 04 anymore. We're in 2023. And for the last 5 years, and keep in mind, I've known Tracy and Phil, these guys for 12 years each. What I see seems to be 2 guys that work really well together, that love each other, and are sort of great, that are grateful and appreciative of everything in front of them and behind them, the warts and all, if you will. So it's a really cool thing to be a part of. And I'm happy that the band, with or without me, is putting out new music that I think is good, so that's that.
It's good to get your perspective, just like it was good to get Johnny's perspective on a couple of things, but you kind of being not what I would think of immediately a hired gun, having a little bit of even of course a different opinion and perspective than Johnny would, being that you weren't in the band in 1987. Sure. And the fact that you're half of Phil's age. Oh, wait, hold on.
We don't do
okay, you know what I mean.
I'm like 3/5 of his age.
Yeah, you're only a couple of years younger than Phil. Is that better? Is that better? I saved that. Yeah.
Because Phil's only 41.
That's right. See, thank you, Dave. See, fact checker. We have a fact checker, and his name's Metal Dave.
Yeah. Today's actually Tracy's birthday, so happy birthday, Trace.
He finally made it to 41.
41, finally. Yeah. And then awesome. Phil's birthday was last week. And then my birthday was the week before. And so I think Tracy just turned 50, trying to do the math, 57 today, 56?
I think it's 57. I think he's a year ahead of me.
66. And then Phil is, I can't remember what year he just turned, but he's mid-60s. And I think he owns it pretty well, especially because some of the conversations we've had, not just aesthetically, but his whole thing is, he goes, man, I was in England in the mid to late 70s. I saw UFO. I saw The Damned. I saw Generation X, and on and on and on and on and on. He goes, I wouldn't trade that. I wouldn't trade that for the world, mate. So
that's a good Phil Lewis right there.
I got to work on my English accent a little bit.
I thought that was bang on, and
that was a pretty good.
It should
Phil.
Be as much time as you spend. Yeah.
Now as a professionally trained voice actor.
Oh, that's right.
Part of my je ne sais quoi to be able to absorb and process and filter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
See, who are you doing now? Are you just being the smug Ace Von Johnson?
I was leaning into like a Gene Simmons thing there.
Oh, right.
I think you were. I heard it.
Okay.
Now if you say kissonline.com 3 times, I will appear in your living room for only $899. You click on my codpiece and get yourself a personalized Gene Simmons of Kiss. That whole thing.
Pretty good. Have you done any voiceover work that anybody would recognize or that's popular?
Yes and no. I've done some stuff that's on Netflix. There is a series called Money Heist. That's a dubbing job. It's a Spanish show that they dubbed in English. I did a bevy of voices for season 3. I should know this stuff, but that's why I write it down so I don't have to remember. I did a bunch of voices for that.
Cool.
I did some other stuff on Netflix. A show called Marianne. a miniseries called The Woods. I was one of the suspected killers. And so these were dubbing jobs.
Yeah.
And then most recently on Shudder, which is a horror streaming series, I did 9 different character, whatever spots, whatever you call it, for their Christmas special called the Joe Bob Briggs Ghoultide Get Together, which was a fundraiser interspliced with several horror movies. And the episode actually raised over $220,000.
Nice.
I also contributed 2 pieces of music to that as well.
Wow.
Cool. That's a little bit of a side hustle that sounds fun and cool. And
I love it.
Yeah.
So when the internet tells me I work at Carl's Jr. and live at my mom's basement or whatever the fuck, I'm always like, are you sure?
Yeah.
I'm like, are you sure? Are you sure? I'm in my upstairs in my office of my house that I live in with my dogs.
Where do you live, by the way? Are you in Nashville?
Well, shit, goddamn, man, I moved to Nashville in the middle of that darn pandemic. I had enough of Hollywood, and I got the fuck out of there.
Okay, Joe Bob Briggs.
Hey, man.
So I didn't realize that the time zone was the same as it is in Texas.
In Tejas. Yeah. You know, I've been threatening to come out here. A girlfriend of mine told me I started talking about it in 2013. So I've been threatening to move out here for 8, 9, 10 years. Some of my best friends are here. I spent about an hour on the phone with Ricky Rackman this morning, who's only about 4-hour drive, who's arguably my closest friend. And I have a stepbrother and his wife that are maybe 3 hours drive. My best friend, Tony Higbee, who plays for Tom Kiefer, he lives literally walking distance up the road from me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so the pandemic hit, and I was paying a fortune to live in my tiny little apartment in Hollywood. And I said, you know what? I think now's the time to jump ship. And I did. And when people go, hey, do you have any regrets about moving to Nashville? I go, man, you know, I do. I regret not moving here fucking sooner.
Wow.
And so I upgraded to a house. I got a massive backyard that the dogs love, et cetera, et cetera. And here I am, a good old in the Bible Belt here.
Yeah. We just had Ricky Rackman on the show, and he mentioned you as being one of his best friends. And yeah, right.
And I brought up your new acquisition of the Carcass shirt.
Oh yeah. He got me a ringer shirt like this. That's this killer tour shirt. Yeah, I love Carcass.
Yeah, I saw you post about that, and I was paying attention.
Thanks.
Carcass shirt from Ricky Rackman gave his buddy Ace Von Johnson a Carcass shirt. What? I want a Carcass shirt.
I want 2 of them. If I get another one, I'll send it to you.
How did you and Ricky become so close? Because Ricky, Ricky's more like our age. And I know you guys are, Hollywood guys and that sort of thing. So there's that. But, I mean, now you've moved to the other side of the country. You guys are still buddies. You've been buddies all these years. What is it about the 2 of you that clicks?
So I met Ricky through Tammy about, for anyone that might not know, I played in Faster Pussycat for 10 years. I met Ricky in probably 2012, and we were acquainted for maybe 2 or 3 years. And I would say probably 2013, 2014. All I remember is the conversation went something like, so what do you listen to? And I was like, oh, like a lot of punk rock mostly. And he was like, he goes, oh, okay. And he goes like, what? And I was like, I don't know, like Social Distortion and the Misfits. And he was like, do you know who Agent Orange is? And I was like, Bloodstains and Miserlou. And he was like, yeah, what about Adolescence? So I was like, the Blue Album, like the Blue Album changed the landscape of punk rock for Southern California. And he was like, really? And he was like, what about TSWell? Do you like TSWell? And I was like, bro, I was supposed to fill in on guitar for TSWell. And he was like, we're going to be friends. And I was like, yeah, we are. And that was literally how it started. And it's, 8, 9, 10 years or whatever of that. And I walked him down the aisle at his fucking wedding was that a year ago? And he met Leah through me. He met his wife through me. And we're just, we get on the phone every other day, and I hate talking on the phone. So I should tell you how close we are.
Yeah.
I recognize that he's Ricky Rackman, but to me, it's like my obnoxious friend. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I say the same thing about Jason.
Really?
Hear you.
Everybody goes, oh, he's the guy from Dangerous Toys. And I go, no, he's just my obnoxious friend.
It didn't occur to me because I'd seen a clip and I thought that Jason was a guest. And then I was like,
Right.
oh, he's on the show with you. And I was like,
We were
okay,
talking about that. We were talking about that sort of pre you joining us today. We were going. He told me the story about how you just thought I was a guest. If that be the truth, I bet people are really sick of Talk Louder having the same goddamn guest every week.
He keeps coming back. I
can't get rid of him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very,
No,
very cool.
Dave's just using my Zoom room because he can't afford the account, the Zoom account. So he just using my room. So I'm just going, dude, I'm gonna hang out while you talk to rock stars.
Well, so Jason and I did 1 or 2 songs together on stage once. Remember the Pussycat incident where you came up and sang "You're So Vain"?
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
Maybe something else. I can't remember. But so for 5 minutes, we were in a band together, bro.
Yeah, we were.
Yeah. So tell us about that. What happened? Tammy ended up sick or something? Or
wasn't that in Maryland?
That was for M3. And this was probably 2016, 17 at the latest.
That's good.
And Jason was 40 and I was 22. And Tammy,
I love that guy.
Sort of suffered through a series of some health issues that week and was basically in the hospital, and which was the culmination of his sobriety. And I'll kind of leave it all at that. And the beginning of his sobriety. And he was like, I remember he was in the hospital bed. He's like, you guys got to do the fucking show without me. Just make sure you do it. And we were like, okay. So we just hit up all our friends that were at the festival and we're like, hey, do you want to do a song or 10 with us? Because we still got to play. And we threw it together. And it was a little stressful at the time, but we still ended up having a good time. I mean, it's M3 and festival style with our friends and everything. And I think like Cher from Vixen came up, and I honestly I don't really remember. Oh, Ted from Danger. I was like, yeah, Ted from Danger Toys. Yeah,
that's fairly common actually. That you're not the guy in Danger.
Oh,
you're correct. I'm not in Danger. You don't look at all like the guy in Danger. What? Some blonde hair, maybe?
Oh, I actually enjoy your guys' records. Ooh, I'm teasing. These are jokes. Keep up.
I got it.
No, I love Ted Poley. He's always a fun hang.
He's got good energy. That guy's so nice. He deserves anything that moves forward for him. I condone it.
No, I'm just busting balls. No, I love Ted. He's a sweetheart. Yeah. And that record, the record's got like a detective or something on the cover. It's a fucking great album. Can't remember, but anyways,
he's a rock and roll savior.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, I would agree with that.
So I was going to ask about that. I knew that Jason fronted Faster Pussycat for a couple songs at some festival. I just wasn't sure if you were in the band at that time. So
anything like that, like when Danny, the bass player, fell over and was.
You're reading my notes, man. I've got that. So okay, let's talk about that because that was. Man, that made the rounds. So for anyone watching or listening that's not familiar, Danny, the bass player for Faster Pussycat, a.k.a. Slim Tender, there's a video clip of him just stumbling backwards and collapsing into the drum riser, and he takes a shot, man. I mean, it looked like his head, like his neck snapped.
So,
what was going on that night?
I was just at my young counterpart Sam Bam Colton's house over the weekend on Sunday discussing this very story because they were asking about it, and since I lived it firsthand, just ran the whole thing then too. So Danny had been going through some I don't know, personal shit, and was ramping up that week, especially that day, and was under the influence of lots of alcohol and lots of other things. And we saw that coming. And so the band that was on tour supporting us, we even had their bass player sort of learn the set. If you go back and watch that like 30-second clip, you'll see a guy jump on stage and put the bass on because he was ready to go. We knew it was going to happen. And what you don't see is just sort of behind Tammy in that video clip on stage, our tech had put a chair. And so Danny didn't realize that the chair had appeared for him to sit in. And so he tripped over the chair, and he was so annihilated that it looks like he hits his head, but that's just the whiplash of his body going loose. he actually took the brunt on his, I don't know, right or left arm. And for the next like 2 weeks, his whole arm just was like purple. And his head was fine, which is a shame because I don't think there's much really in there anyhow. But the interesting point was we were in Georgia, and the next morning we got on the Monsters of Rock cruise. And at the time, no one had, cell phone, wireless Wi-Fi packages or whatever. And so we were all off the grid for 6 days. And so it all kind of went, the video clip and all this stuff went viral over the course of 72 hours, and no one could reach us. And so we got back on the mainland, and Danny's mom had left him all these voicemails thinking he was in the hospital or was hurt or had died and all these things. Even my best friend at the time, who was a total straight-laced normal guy, was like sitting in his cubicle in an office, and some guy was like, dude, have you seen this clip? And he's like, oh yeah, that's my best friend right there. And I gestured to him as if I didn't give a shit, because I didn't, because he had been so awful all day. I actually had some family, as I mentioned, my stepbrother who lives in northern Georgia was at the show. And I introduced him to my stepbrother, and he said something really, off color to, it was like, and I was like, what an asshole. Like, I bring my family to the show. I'm like, hey, it's my bass player, Danny. And he's like, fuck you, that kind of thing. So when he fell, that's why I was like, you fucking made your bed. You might as well fucking lay in it. So that was that. I don't know what the dog is chewing on downstairs, but it sounds...
Couch.
Sounds expensive.
Couch.
Yeah.
Hey, what are you doing?
He's got the couch in his mouth.
Yeah. Sounds
We had Bridget from New York Loose on the show a long time ago, and we were talking about her band's career at the time, and she was saying that Danny, of course, was in the band.
Yes.
And she said she said she had a hard time keeping her band on the straight and narrow. Like, they were party animals, and Danny, I think, doesn't really try to even hide it.
No, it's part of his allure. Hush.
So what was it like? I mean, so you were in Faster Pussycat for 10 years, and Tammy now has been sober for a number of years, which is something I think is amazing. I thought that guy, I assumed, just smoked cigarettes in the shower. Like, I can't imagine that guy.
Fucking deal, Bubba. This fucking shit's got to get fucking sorted, okay?
Bubba.
Bubba.
Yeah, that's a Tammy thing, isn't it? Because he texted me one time and he called me Bubba, and I was like, is he referencing the fact that I'm from Texas, or is this just what he normally calls?
It's his term of endearment. Or calling you fucker. Like,
so you were in the band before Tammy got sober, and
that was that incident that weekend of his hospital stay when Jason filled in with all our friends, was the starting of that, because the doctor was basically like, if you don't stop doing substance A, B, and C, you're gonna fucking die. So those are your options. You can keep going and drop dead, or you can stop. And so clearly he stopped. And it was, really interesting sort of watching the sort of story arc of his, and, to his benefit. I mean, I have a better relationship with Tammy now than I think I did when I was in the band, predominantly, I think, because he's sober, and so he's not, you didn't know which sort of iteration of him you would get when people are partying nonstop.
It's kind of like that anyway, when people are kind of blotto half the time. I wonder who I'm talking to right now, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
I complimented Tammy on just his appearance and just even his voice, and just his strength as a person, and he's smiling on stage and shit. It's like night and day.
Coming to sound checks, he cares now, which is really great to see. Because he probably wouldn't want me to say it, but I'll say it for him. There was such a long period of time where he did not give a shit, and now he really does. It shows. The band sounds great. This is probably the best incarnation that he's got currently of the band ever, and and he's doing new music finally. And, it's just great to see him happy and healthy and taking care of himself.
Yeah.
And like I said, I have a better relationship with him now than I did, at least, maybe the first couple years I was in the band. It was very like, didn't know what I was gonna get that day. And so now he'll call and I'm like, what's up, fucker? He's like, hey, Bubba, fucking just want to tell you I miss you, fucker. So
That's
it's
sweet.
like I said,
I've always thought he was sweet.
He's one of my heroes. I've make notes about it.
Yeah.
Tammy's he's one of my favorite rock
the
singers.
real deal.
One of my favorite rock and roll characters. Just the real deal. And I've been trying to get him on this show forever, but
he's not a big
working on it.
He's not a big like press guy, like podcasts and interviews and stuff like that. It's not really his, raison d'etre or anything like that. He's kind of like, you fucking do it, fucker.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of his that was sort of his portrayal on That Metal Show when he was on That Metal Show.
Yeah.
It's kind
I
of
was there.
Oh, you were there?
Not on the show, but I was there in the audience.
Oh, nice. Nice. Yeah. If I remember the clip, it was like, they were talking about, it was Eddie, because Mark Slaughter was there. And I think he was saying he had all these guys, 80s metal rocker dudes all in a row. And he was going, man, it's cool that, now that we're of a certain age, and a lot of singers don't take care of their voices and they can't hit the high notes anymore, kind of thing. And like, Mark, you still got me. And Mark lets one rip, and then Eddie looks at Tammy and goes, hey, Tammy, give us one. And he goes, he did, he was just like, what? Why would I don't sing like that. Why are you even asking me to do? I don't do that. And have you ever heard me do that in Faster Pussycat? Doesn't.
No, he means
anyway,
it's punk rock.
He's right.
Yeah.
He's kind of crooning and getting a vibe, and he's the color. He's the color. It's not about vocal acrobats. It's about rock and roll.
Absolutely.
That's where there's a mic drop right there.
Yeah.
I was supposed to.
So why did you leave Faster Pussycat? And I think you alluded to something earlier that I've always thought was my theory. And my theory was that they just weren't as active as LA Guns. And LA Guns, to me, I think they are now. I think they're picking up steam. But I would say 5, 6, 7 years ago, Faster wasn't out and doing as much as LA Guns, and I could see where that would be a catalyst for someone maybe jumping ship. But it's your story. You tell us.
Yeah, I'll try to give you the 10-cent version. I think Tammy's approach is predominantly, in the 14 years I've known him, be like, go out, do a 2-month tour, make sure we all hate each other, and go home. And then I'll see you in 7 or 8 months. And it got to the point as I got into my 30s and my mid 30s where I was like, this is exhausting, A, and then B, it was like it was more of a work harder than smarter kind of approach, at least for the band or for myself. And also the fact that there wasn't any new music coming out. I mean, I think Pussycat's released 2 tracks that I've played on in the last 14 years, one of which was after I left the band. And so I wanted to be in a band that at least put out music every 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And there were some reasons why he wasn't putting out music that he didn't even tell me until I had already left the band. It was something to do with, something from like the 90s where like someone had like a lien on his publishing or some weird thing. It's more his story to tell than mine. But he had never told me that. And I was like, so we recorded 20, 30, 40 songs at Gilby's house or Gilby's studio and your studio and all over the place over the last 10 years, only for you to just shit can them. And so that was one of those things where I just kind of felt like I was kind of swimming in circles. And of course I didn't know that at the time. He'd be like, hey, fucker, why don't you come over and work on these songs with me? And then none of that shit ever came out. I mean, even that song NOLA, New Orleans, that he just put out like a year ago or whatever, I recorded that 3 different times with him, none of which were the one that came out. And that song was old when I joined the band. When he had a version of that in 09. He had a version of that in 09, with the previous guitar player. So stuff like that. The fact that that Chad, Stuart, the drummer, and myself were basically co-managing the band for like the last five years that I was in the band, and I was running all the social media outlets and all these other things. It kind of wore on me after a while. And LA Guns had been approaching me for at least 4 different intervals over the course of maybe a year or so, following the reunion. And I finally sort of relented just because of my schedule and some personal reasons. I said, yeah, fuck it. I'll go out with these guys for 2 weeks, try it on for size, see how it works. And I went out and I was like, oh man, nobody's, going crazy. Nobody's screaming. There's a manager. There's a tour manager. I've got my own, stage right guy. And then everyone was like, okay, time to go back to work with Pussycat. And I did double duty for at least 12 months. And, and then it got to a point where I had to pick one, and I picked what I thought was best for me as a human fucking being. And I stayed with LA Guns, and I love Tammy. And, there's times where I'm like, man, it'd be cool to still be doing that. I mean, fuck, I got up and played with them over the summer at least 20 times.
Wow.
We run that Sonic Slam package tour with Tom Kiefer and LA Guns and Pussycat.
Yeah, it was great.
But I think the right decision for me, at least, was to do the Guns gig, and I don't have any regrets about that. And
let's talk about your role in LA Guns as a writer. Are you contributing things I'm just going to guess to Phil directly or to Tracy directly, or both? Are you sending it to everybody when you sort of have something that sounds LA Guns-ish? I'm going to set this off, tell us a little bit about how that works in your situation.
Sure. I usually, because I do a lot, I'm actually sitting at sort of my studio setup here. I usually demo stuff for, whatever the project is or job is. And for each record, I've submitted a song or 3. And this newest record, I think it's been a couple months since I've seen the track listing. I think my song closes out the record. But we all contribute to each piece of music, et cetera, and Tracy's pretty what's the word I'm looking for? Diplomatic as far as like publishing and whatnot. And so which is why I think the band is usually credited across the board for basically as an album in full. But Checkered Past had a composition of mine, and as does the new record. And I'm sure moving forward, keep going with that sort of trajectory. Although obviously the bulk of it's written by Tracy, if not in full, at least, the majority of the music. But usually I just send it to him and go, it's usually like a riff or sometimes a fleshed out song. I'll go, hey, what do you think of this? And both songs on the last 2 records, I sent him in and he goes, these are great. Let me just put a little, an extra little thing on this, or put a rhythm guitar on it or whatever. And you just do whatever. And he's been, kind enough to sort of be like, those are your songs. You take the solo, so, and doing things where I'm writing for other projects or at least attempting to, et cetera. I'm usually, trying to put myself in that mindset of like, well, what would I want to hear? What does this sound like an LA Guns song, or does this sound like a whatever band project, et cetera, song? And, being a relatively decent fan of the first 3 albums combined with what the current incarnation of the band is, I'm trying to go okay, if I could take, 60% cocked and loaded and 30%, missing piece, and 10% of what I want, and stick it in a blend, and 5%, Hollywood Vampires. Because that's what ultimately, it's not about like, what do I want? It's like, well, what is a LA Guns fan going to think of this?
Yeah, I'd like to interrupt you there for a second. I'm not going to ask your opinion about anybody else. Let's make it be about LA Guns.
Yeah.
When you write something, let's say you're not thinking about any singer or any other, secondary guitar part or whatever. When you write something, is it kind of like an aha moment? Wow, I can hear Phil singing this. Maybe not so much like you said, parts of this and parts of this era and this era of Guns, and make it be this one thing. Is it like, oh, I hear, my other project guy singing this, or I hear Tracy, I could hear Tracy soloing over this, or again, I hear Philip's voice on this. Does that ever happen? Is that like sort of the positive barometer, the way to measure something that you've sort of like fallen into? What would be filed under cool riff number 17, whatever?
Yeah. I don't think it ever really occurs to me like that. I don't think I'm ever really, unfortunately, as you're a singer and a frontman, I don't ever really write with the singer or frontman in mind. 90.
No, that's good. But after you write it, after it's kind of like starting to grow arms and legs a little bit, your idea.
Yeah.
Do you ever like go, oh, that would be cool if so-and-so, I hear so-and-so, is that part of your...
It's mostly I'm writing exclusively for myself. And if something comes out and I was like, wow, this sounds like it could be a Dangerous Toys song, I might call you and go, hey, what do you think of this riff? Or what do you think of this? I did that pretty recently with a Junkyard. Actually was talking to Tim Mosher, the guitar player, on the phone today, because we work together on some other stuff, sort of commercially, if you will. And I had sent him this riff maybe a year ago, and I was like, hey, I've got this riff, and it's been sitting on my phone and then into my computer and then into a demo MP3 for years. What do you think? And he was like, oh, I really like the verse and the chorus, but the riff is too busy. He goes, we could use this. And I said, great, run off with it. But I never wrote it hearing a singer. It's sort of like, if you came to me and were like, hey, do you have any songs? I would go through all my library and be like, oh, I could hear you singing that. Like, it's sort of an afterthought, I guess, would be the easiest way to describe it. I just don't really, I think maybe because I'm not like I think Tracy operates the opposite. I think Tracy's going, this is for LA Guns, this is with Bill, this is with Bill, this is for this other project, this is for, Sunbomb or whatever. And he's working that way. I'm kind of doing my own thing. And if it becomes a full fleshed out song, great. I usually tend to just write a riff or an idea. And then I'm not a really solid, it's seldom that I complete a song from A to Z. It's usually, I consider myself a collaborative writer. I prefer that. Actually, okay. I mentioned Tony Higbee from Tom Kiefer's band, and I mentioned Sam Bam, who is my sort of former protege, who I put in my position in Pussycat and is still currently with them. Sam Bam Colton. The three of us actually last week were together for an entire 8-day stretch here in Nashville, just writing. So, and that was easier for me to sit down with two other guys who both are guitar players and go like, I'm working on this thing in G minor. I'm working on this thing in, C sharp major, whatever. I'm like, what do you have? What do you have? And sort of cranking out these little ideas and turning them, taking my riff and his chorus and making a Frankenstein there. I work better like that. But, it's been so long where I've been in a band where we got in a room and cranked out stuff together. It's a nice change. But as far as what you asked, I just write, and if it sounds like something cool, and most of the time it sounds like nonsense, and it just either dies on the vine on my phone or my computer, and then 5 years later someone goes, hey, do you have any punk rock riffs? And I go, actually, and I open up my little file and off they go.
Yeah. Tell us, as a guitar player, what have you learned about your playing or guitar playing in general since you've been paired up with Tracy, who I consider Tracy's one of my favorite guitar heroes.
He's pretty rad.
I think he's an awesome guitar player. So for you being in a band with him and being co-guitarist with him, have you picked up anything from just,
every day of my life? Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us.
He's a legitimate guitar hero. I mean, as far as like even pop culture goes, like so many people don't know this, but he's the fucking Guns and Guns N' Roses. You know what I mean? Yeah. And LA Guns, obviously. But I would say anytime I'm able to sit down and actually watch him play, I'm always going like, oh, okay, what was that? And he's real, because he does teach as well, so he's always really patient. And the off chance I may actually have the gall to be like, hey, can you show me that little thing you just did? Because that was fucking rad. He's like, oh yeah, of course. I think the most imperative thing he taught me or whatever was to be a little more, to not be in such a rush. Like he was like, you don't need to try to fit in all these little things. He's like, you can just grab something and emote on it. Not that I didn't know or do or whatever, but he gave me a little more confidence to sort of just breathe, rather than like, look how many I can squeeze into the, and started breaking into a Dwayne Peters there.
You are reading my notes. You are reading my notes, man.
Here's the fucking deal, Dave. I want these guys in U.S. bombs to fucking.
God, that's a whole other can of worms.
Well, I want to open it later. So
I've at least one band member of all my years. I have to do an impression of at least one, and it's usually the singer. I don't have a Tracy. I really don't. There's no Tracy. He has to be the singer. But there's so much that I've learned that I wouldn't even know how to give you like a shorthand list. It's I think mostly just the sort of giving the room to breathe and taking your time, and then thinking outside the box, which I mean, a lot of this stuff wasn't like I wasn't aware of, but just kind of compounded that. And then also, we all have a very eclectic palette, which I think is beneficial to anyone at any instrument, any craft, singer, drummer, flautist, whatever. I listen to like 80% punk rock, 10%, 60% punk rock, 10% heavy metal. And then the rest of it's like, I listen to a lot of like classical and scores and stuff like that. Like I'm a big Danny Elfman fan, John Williams stuff. Of course, the people's names are escaping me. Wojciech or something like that. The guy that did the Bram Stoker's Dracula score, stuff like that. Because I also do some composition and stuff like that, where I'm trying to cull from that world rather than just like loud guitars. And I think just bringing in all those different elements and talking more with Tracy and guitars, rockabilly and Shanker and stuff that like I'm aware of or whatever, but things that weren't really on my palette prior to sort of maybe the last 5 to 10 years,
Yeah. How did you mentioned Dwayne Peters, and I didn't know that you spent some years in U.S. bombs. Tell us about that little period of your career. How long did it last? Were you on any of the albums? Just tell me about working with Dwayne.
So, okay. I loved the U.S. bombs as a teenager. That they were at like the height. Tim Armstrong from Rancid started a vanity label in the late 90s. They're one of the biggest bands out there. Green Day, Offspring, Bad Religion. So the singer of Rancid started this band label called Hellcat. And the two bands he signed out of the gate were the Dropkick Murphys, who've gone on to become basically an arena band, and then this other band called the U.S. Bombs. And a guy that used to beat me up in high school named Billy Dunbar, his favorite band was the U.S. Bombs. And so I had a little laugh about that in my 20s when I joined this band. This guy was a freshman in high school, and he'd walk by me and pelt me with an apple and call me the F word, and all that stuff. And so, or a poser or whatever, some combination of. And I met Dwayne in my teenage years. I'm trying to not go down the rabbit hole because I'm really good at that. But I'm an Angelino. I lived there till I was 14, second generation LA, blah, 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 blah. My mom and my stepdad moved me to San Diego when I was 14. So from 14 to 19, I lived in San Diego. And Dwayne Peters' nephew, Chris Sklamowski, and I made friends in high school, just going to punk shows. And so I sort of joined his band at one point for 5 minutes. I was like 16, 17, 18. And so I met Dwayne then. I met him through his nephew and sort of was in his peripheral a little bit. And then moving forward, 21, I started dating a woman who was in an all-girl punk band. I'm not even going to say their name. It's not worth mentioning. That was on his Dwayne Peters' little vanity label. And my girlfriend's little sister, or my little sister, if you will, is a girl named Susie Moon, who's doing really well in the sort of punk circuit right now. I'm very proud of her. I've obviously known her for 20 years now.
My friend plays bass in that band.
Patty?
Yeah, Patty Bowe. Yeah,
I've known Patty for 20 years.
Yeah,
and when he was with the River City Rebels, and we toured together. I come from a punk rock background, and so I played in all these punk bands. And I met Dwayne more in depth when I was dating this artist on his label, and we were around each other all this time. And then I was in an LA band called the Generators, and we went out on tour with the U.S. Bombs. I was probably 22, and he was going through a lot of drug issues and sort of confided in me. He's like, I remember you. You were my nephew's friend, and you're dating that girl on my label. You're in the trust tree. And so and then the flip side of that was his guitar player, the sort of Slash of U.S. Bombs, this guy named Kerry Martinez, Shattered Faith, Bad Luck Charms, all this stuff. And Kerry was one of those guys I looked up to when I was a kid, and was always cool to me. When I was 17, my first band did a show with the Circle Jerks, U.S. Bombs, and my band. And I remember Kerry and I hanging in the parking lot after, and blah, 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 blah. And so, it's not uncommon for Kerry and I to get on the phone for 3 hours at a time now. And he's kind of like my big brother still. And so Dwayne was courting me to play bass for the Bombs. He was like,
Wade's gonna retire and we need a guy to thump the low end, okay?
And so I was sound checking with them, and I was 22. So I was like, wow, we're in Europe. So over there, the market for them was 1,000 people a night, 2,000 people, whatever, tangible. And I was still playing in this band called the Generators. And I came home from that tour, and I joined his other project, not the Huns, but the other project called the Gunfight, the Dwayne Peters Gunfight. And so I did that band off and on for maybe 7 years or so. I played on the second album called Checkmate, which was a nod to his son Chelsea Chess, who had just passed away. It was a whole gnarly experience working with this guy who I was close with at the time, whose son then died. And so I did that. He and I had a project called The Great Unwashed with Greg Keane from TSOL, the keyboard player, and who also plays with X. And I think he played with Bob Dylan in Berlin for a long time as well. Wow. And so this was all in the first half of my 20s. And so I'm working with all these guys, and that sort of segues into joining Pussycat, because the guy that booked the U.S. Bombs and Dwayne Peters Gunfight is a guy named Charlie Overby. Kit Ashley from a band called Big Bang Babies, which is where Kerry Kelly, the guitar player, got his start from. And so this is where the paths sort of cross. But yeah, I worked with Dwayne. I was in the Bombs for maybe 6 months. We did 2 months in Europe once, and that was kind of it. I'm not on any Bombs records. Although the 3 core guys of the band, the drummer, the bass player, and Kerry, the guitar player, did a project after the fact called the UX Bombs, without Dwayne, that I played on that record, just sort of as a nod. So I could tell you stories about Dwayne for hours and hours, but most of the people that are interested in LA Guns and Dangerous Toys and what we're talking about don't have any clue about that. And then, of course, Dwayne more recently has gone way off the deep end in his sort of right-wing nonsense, and I don't condone any of that as far as his weird diatribes and whatnot. But he does have a long history of mental health issues, and politics aside, I just sort of take it at face value. And he and I haven't talked in some time, but I'm still very close with Kerry Martinez. Actually, they were talking about trying to get the core sort of with a band like that, there's no real original lineup, but the lineup that was popular in their Hellcat era, put that back together. And there was some talk about doing some shows this year, next year, soon, kind of nostalgia's sake. I hate to say cash grab, but whatever. And Kerry was like, if Johnny Two Bags, who's been in Social Distortion for at least 15 years and is also a friend, if Two Bags can't do it, and probably can't, would you do it? Because you're the only other guy that sort of can handle this. I said, if I'm free, and it gets me to play with Kerry, because he's like a Tracy to me. He's just like a big brother.
Yeah.
I would do it just for the sake of doing it. But yeah, that's sort of that in a very, very quick 8-year nutshell.
I was just curious because U.S. Bombs is I've got the one record I have is awesome. Is it War Torn or War
Birth? That's
War
the record.
Yeah.
War Birth.
Great record. And I saw him a couple times, and Kerry actually gave me a T-shirt at one of their gigs. Yeah. And I held on to it for the longest time, but I think it was a large or extra large. Somehow it was too big for me, and eventually I got rid of it. But I always remember them being, all my punk rock friends loved them. Dwayne, of course, with his background in skateboarding, And then, he's another one of those characters, man. It's just like walks the walk, man. It's almost to the point that it's frightening,
You may not like it, but he is 100% the real fucking thing.
Yeah. Well, cool. I didn't know that was part of your past. And when I did a little research.
When I saw that, doing the research that I did, which wasn't a lot, I'm just confessing, I thought that was pretty rad. So I just learned a shit ton. So even in the
condensed version,
he tried to condense that, and I was like, wow, I thought this was a condensed version.
Yeah, sorry. I do a lot of tangenting.
That's good. That's good. Details. I like details.
Yeah. How do you know our friends, Lower Class Brats? You mentioned San Diego earlier. So I've known Bones and Marty for 27 years, and they're one of my favorite bands. And so when I knew that you knew them, I think you and I were talking on Twitter one time, and it was like, what? You know who these guys are?
There's like probably three LCB records back here somewhere.
Yeah. How did is San Diego your connection to those guys, or?
Inadvertently. So I mentioned punk rock, yada, yada. So I had my very first band as a teenager, and there was a punk band from Philly called The Virus, sort of like the Casualties and that kind of stuff. I call it hair punk. They're more concerned about how big their hair is than the music. And, like on the, like Exploited, GBH, One Way System, that kind of stuff. Right. And the singer relocated to San Diego and started coming to my shows, this guy, Mike Virus. And he basically absorbed my band. My original drummer, myself, and my bass player turned guitar player, who then replaced me when I left this band. We started called Cheap Sex. Yeah. And so I was 18 or 19 years old, and we did this debut record. They're like touring it right now. It's like 20-year anniversary, Launch Off to War, hair punk. And we signed to some little indie label that was had Lower Class Brats. And they set up a tour with both bands. That actually never ended up happening because Cheap Sex got in a terrible car accident. One of the guys almost died. It was a whole thing. And that went tits up, as they say. But by that point, I had left the band. I had joined another band called Madcap that had a little sort of indie record deal, was touring all the time. And so I joined Madcap, and I went that way and they went that way. But inadvertently, I met the Lower Class Brats guys and Marty and Bones. And a lot of these guys, just like Kerry Martinez, a lot of these guys were like, oh man, I fucking love that first Faster Pussycat record. Marty hit me up last month and was like, hey, can I come to this LA Guns show? And can you put me on the guest list? I was like, yeah, of course, no problem. Same thing, I'm not going to name drop, but lots of guys that I grew up watching in the punk rock scene, then years later were like, dude, you're in LA Guns. Can I come watch your band? And I was like, yeah. So, which I love, because at the end of the day, I'm just a fucking fan. But that's how, right? We're all fans. I mean, look at the background of all of our stuff.
Yeah.
That was sort of how I met them. And then Ron.
This is Mom's Basement 101.
Hey man, I mean, I love it, and then Ron Martinez came in as their bass player. And then Ron was the guy that put me on my first tour. I was like 17. I was a child. I was in high school, so I had a history with him. And then at one point before Fred came in as a second guitar player, I have a tendency to sort of shoot my shot, as the kids are saying. And I would be like, hey man, if you're ever recording and you want a guitar player on some shit, I'd love to play guest guitar on something. And for about 3 or 4 years, they're like, oh, we should totally have you be a second guitar player or play on an album or whatever. And then my buddy Fred came in and sort of occupied that role. But for a minute, we were talking about that because I still try to keep my sort of punk rock roots going. I'm actually working on some stuff. I'm probably not supposed to say anything, but I'm working on some stuff with the Electric Frankenstein guys right now. Cool. I love that band.
Yeah, that's a cool band.
25 years ago. And so, and people know me now for Pussycat and LA Guns or whatever the hell else. But I mean, my roots are predominantly, I was in Murphy's Law and the U.S. bombs and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I try to kind of still, I don't want to go to the shows, but I want to listen to the records still.
Yeah. I think we all know how that goes.
When I feel like I'm sorry, Dave, I feel like there's a a pretty good connection. And I think that you just sort of like, show and tell. You just went like, here it is right here, inadvertently, without even saying anything. The connection between like the cool, like rock and roll influenced punk rock, whether it be like oi punk or, even like some of the bands you mentioned, some of the bands you played for, the whole hair punk thing even solidifies the where I'm going with this. So many of my punk rock friends, like you said, like Marty said, I should say, love the first Faster record, love the first couple LA Guns records. They take in a lot. It's like, okay, well, who doesn't like AC/DC and Motorhead? Those of you who don't like AC/DC and Motorhead, fuck off. You can go away, right? And then whoever's kind of left in the dirt right there is probably going to have a few punk rock albums, but they're also going to have a couple of LA Guns and Faster Pussycat records too. And whatever, a Junkyard record, 5 Junkyard record, maybe a Circus of Power and a Rhino Bucket. And there's this sort of like,
that's right up the middle of the aisle.
You could say class of 87, class of 89 kind of culture that we're talking about, where Bones and Marty from LZB can walk in and go, I have all of these records at home. Really? Do you like this punk rock band? That crossover that's not really called crossover is thick, and it doesn't get talked about
enough. I agree. And I was just on this rant, which I'm good at, maybe a week ago, and I was like, I think I was a fan, and I flat out was like putting my finger in his chest, and I was like, do they have a drummer? Do they have a guitar player and a singer? Yeah. Okay, it's a rock band. He goes, oh, and I was like, drummer, singer, guitar player, rock band. Don't matter. Long hair, short hair, mohawk, shaved head, whatever. Drummer, singer, guitar player, rock band. Fucking rock band.
Yeah. I say that about hip hop and country. Does it have drums on it? It's rock and roll.
Yeah.
Oh man, it shouldn't be NWA, shouldn't be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Well, it got drums. Are they hardcore?
Yeah.
Do you hate them? Yeah, it's rock and roll.
That first NWA, I've got that. That first NWA record.
Oh my God,
it's punk rock than fucking most thing.
It's hardcore, man. It is so. And you know what? They're talking about real shit, and people forget that too. Yeah. So heavy. You could say heavy too.
Well, and I'm a huge Cash fan. I've got a Johnny Cash portrait on me, and I'm always kind of the mindset of where it's like, again, drummer, singer, guitar player, huh? Okay, but you got this guy writing about don't bring your guns to town and whatever else, and I'm like, that you put that in the same sort of cache of music as like Social Distortion or Stray Cats, and you're like, well, they're kind of three different genres, but they all still work, so I hate music elitism. I don't have time for any of that. I grew up, just like you guys, pre-internet. I'm just at that cusp where it was like, it wasn't until my like junior or senior year in high school there was an internet in the school library, but before that it was like, my older neighbor up the street would give me a cassette tape and be like, this is Metallica, listen to this. Nice. I was like, no. But I liked what I liked, and it was Huey Lewis and the Beach Boys, and it was Slayer, and it was Danzig, and it was Black Flag, and it would be, whatever the fuck I heard on the radio. It might have been fucking Black Crowes. It might have been, it could be this, it could be that. I turn on MTV one day and I was like, Carcass. I was like, this is kind of cool, or it would be like, something off this second Dr. Dre album or whatever the fuck it was. I have an eclectic palette, and I love that. I wish more people had that. And I think as musicians, I think I mentioned this earlier, as a guitar player, whatever instrument you gravitate to, I think it behooves you to go outside of just your little box. Like I'm known for whatever, maybe this band or these bands, but my box isn't just this, it's all of this. And I think more people should have that approach to stuff. I mean, you're just as apt to walk in here. I could have on Chubby Checker, or I could have on Watain, right. Or I could have on Subhumans from Canada, or I could have on Subhumans from the UK, or I could have on fucking Enya. And people are like, do you have any? What is that, like a embarrass? What's the term for like, something you don't talk about, like an embarrassing hidden
guilty pleasure?
Guilty pleasure. And I go, I don't believe in that. I said, but if you want one, I would say like Enya or some shit like that. But I love that. So who gives a fuck? I like what I like. Eclectic palette. And well, although I wouldn't say drummer, singer, guitar player, it's still eclectic. And I think it's you got to open your mind, man. You got to open your mind.
Yeah, I like one note for a really long time, but I also like, all of the instruments falling down the stairs at the speed of light in time.
I mean, it could be anything, man. I'm not one to judge people based on the music preferences. I always just say, like, there's stuff that's not for me, but I mean, I would never. That's sort of like the one thing where I'd be like, and that maybe like film. Like I would be like, oh, you're really into those kind of weird art noir films. Okay, that's cool. I would fall asleep in 5 minutes, but that's great. What is it? It's I'm not here to judge your art. Art is subjective, et cetera, et cetera. So
yeah.
And I think that's also the flip side of why I get so incensed when people are like on the internet, like, and I go, you could never do 1/100th of what I fucking do. So first of all, eat my ass. Second of all, unless you're also creating or an artist, you should probably shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
But that's also me.
I think people are basing. I think a lot of people base their musical taste on what wardrobe looks best on their person.
Yeah. And again, that's so shallow. I don't.
Yeah. And usually between the ages of, like, I don't know, 17 and 19, depending if you're male or female or whatever you are, I think that era of you're kind of know-it-all, and whatever you're into is God, and what everything else sucks. Yeah. Everybody goes through that. I went through that. There was a time that if it wasn't Venom, Slayer, Metallica, or Merciful Fate, it sucked. And fuck you. Yeah. And then I realized, like, God, I kind of miss my Kiss records and my Queen records and my Elton records. I kind of miss all of that shit. Well, and I had to wake up and grow up quick.
Yeah, and then you realize you're going, wait, I'm typing. There was no typing 20 years ago. But you're going, wait a minute. So Metallica listens to Killing Joke and Discharge. Okay, well, what does Killing Joke listen to?
And the Vandals and Misfits and what?
Yeah.
It expands from there.
No.
Yeah. So speaking of wide palettes and musical variations, tell us a little bit about Neon Coven.
Oh yeah. God, I just talked to Kyle.
Great band name.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this is a project that you have or had with Jacob Bunton.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Jacob is one of my closest friends. You'll never meet a sweeter guy. I love Jacob.
I agree.
Yeah, everyone knows Jacob.
Yep.
And for those who may not know, Jacob fronted the project called Adler with Steven Adler. And
Johnny Martin.
I think it's known now, but he's the singer for the Mick Mars solo album that may or may not materialize at some point, which I've heard some of. And is amazing. And he's a session guy. He's like a ghostwriter. I don't know what I can and can't say, but he's worked with some massive artists. And he just looks like a guy in a rock band. Like he walks around Hollywood, his cowboy boots and his bandana on, and he just looks like some scrawny guy in a band. But he's also, in his own right, respectfully, incredibly successful in his field, which I admire. And because he can sit down and he'll be like, "Oh, you want an album? Yeah, call me tomorrow. I'll have it done." And he, myself, and our singer Anthony Montremano, we were on a Monsters of Rock cruise about some 6, 7, 8 years ago. I don't remember what time frame it was. And the joke was, we were the young guys, we look like a boy band. And on a dare, you guys should start a project. And we're like, oh, okay. And so we went and met at, of course, of all places, we went and had dinner at the Rainbow and said, like, well, what do we want to do? And similar to what I'm doing with Tony and Sam, Tony Higbee and Sam Bam Colton, I was like, okay, so everyone knows us for this. Let's go outside of that. And so we were like 9 Inch Nails, Depeche Mode, Duran Duran, Killing Joke, that sort of stuff. And we wrote and recorded an EP that somehow managed to moderately chart off of one song, mostly because of Jacob's sort of industry insight.
Yeah.
And then we did another EP and some singles, and then we did a full-length album during the pandemic called Future Postponed, which was definitely reflecting on the sign of the times, 2020. And I would say that album is in my top 3 things I'm probably most proud of as far as my output. So the full length, I think I wrote or co-wrote 4 of the 11 songs. Obviously, I played on probably, most of it, and which of course says a lot because Jacob is infinitely a better guitar player than I'll ever be. So it was very a group effort, and it made the rounds. Actually, I was proud for a minute that one of the songs that was getting the most terrestrial radio play, terrestrial as opposed to the internet stuff,
Right.
was my composition and arguably the heaviest track on the record. I think it's called "Dead to Me," and really fun guitar solo. I literally fell off a stool laughing while we were doing it, and we were all laughing. But anyhow, it was a really fun album to do, and it's more of a studio project. It's not really a real band. They've done shows with and without me, and I say that because the band's only probably played maybe on stage 10 times in 6 years.
And this is Neon Coven you're still talking
Neon Coven, yeah. So
where can someone hear this or buy this?
Everywhere.
Oh, great.
Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, whatever. It's out there. It's very tangible. There's a vinyl pressing of the album, Future Postponed. Still pretty proud of that. And we all talk, and everyone's busy with their respective projects. So who knows if and when there'll be more. I think they just put out they put out a single over the summer that I had nothing to do with, because they basically were like, well, you're on tour for the next 2 months. We're going to get together and tough shit. So and I don't even know if I even heard it.
So it's kind of a collective, huh?
It's like a collective between the 5 of us. I think it's all it has to contain 4 out of 5 of us for it to be the band. Yeah. And then Jacob brought in Kyle Cunningham, our drummer, to play on. He produced and co-wrote the most recent Orianthi album, and he brought in Kyle to work on that. So we're all busy with other stuff and everything, and so like I said, it's more of a studio effort than I think of it as like a real project, if anything, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah. But that sounds really cool. I had never heard of that. I saw that in the information that I had for research to talk to you today, and I was like, that sounds very interesting. So the influences are more of like what sounds like, and just to kind of like back up a little bit. I mean, Duran Duran, Depeche Mode, Killing Joke, sort of like a goth pop side of things, but major key, big melodies, things like that. It reminds me of something that might be even considered a little Bowie-esque. Am I close?
Oh, yeah, definitely some Bowie, and I think Jacob brought that in a lot. Actually, I mentioned the album I'm not supposed to probably talk about, but the thing he did with that famous guitar player, and a lot of that, I remember telling him, I was like, wow, I hear so much Bowie in your vocal delivery. And the thing is that Jacob only sings 2 of the songs on the album. Actually, the front man is a guy named Anthony Montemano. Ow, why are you biting me? I'm trying to talk to these people. She's a puppy.
Pay attention to me. That's what that bite means.
Yeah. Here we are. But yeah, there's definitely some Bowie influence. There's also some Typo Negative and Ministry. It sort of runs the gamut of that stuff. And I'm not one to be like, you got to listen to my record. But I'm really proud of that album, as I am Checkered Past as well. But this was a little bit more. I contributed lyrics to this record, and I haven't done that. I hadn't done that 20 fucking years. So I can't remember what the song's called. The second song on the album, I think, is probably 80% my lyrics. And it was humbling for me when my singer and then Jacob, who's also a singer, were like, no, this is great. Finish this off. And so yeah, Neon Coven.
Nice. Neon Coven. People need to check that out. I remember hearing some of it when you first released some of your initial material, and I think I paid attention to it because you were involved, and of course I knew Jacob was involved, so I thought, oh, okay, these guys, I like their rock and roll stuff, so let's see what this is about. Yeah. And I remember thinking it was really well done. It's very gothy, sort of industrial, mysterious kind of. I don't know if you'd call it synth wave or dark wave or anything like that, but
it sort of runs the gamut.
Yeah.
I had a hard time describing that record that some of the Jellyfish Camp made, that Imperial Drag record. I fell in love with that record.
I love that.
That's
album.
like an essential, like, it's like pop music, but I hear like, oh, who wrote these songs for you? Brian Eno and David Bowie? What's going on? I feel like you might be on the same team. Some of that stuff.
Oh yeah. And that record is fantastic. I mean, it's like if like the Beatles showed up in the 90s or something like that.
Right.
So I gotta ask you,
wore glam clothes, right?
Yeah.
I gotta ask you, is the origins of your name related to Ace Frehley or
None. Zero? None.
None?
No, so I joined that band Madcap. I mentioned I was 19, and part of my sort of hazing, if you will, was we had a tour. I had just turned 19, and we had a tour that started in Florida, and the band was based in Burbank. So I basically moved into my sister's house in Sherman Oaks in Los Angeles area, and joined this band. And part of my hazing or whatever was they mostly made me drive the bulk of the trip to Florida in an Econoline pulling a trailer. And I had only done that maybe once or twice. And we were leaving LA, and there was a massive accident that I maneuvered around. And I remember looking out the passenger window and watching cars slam into each other. We're cruising down the emergency lane. I'm avoiding all this. And my singer, at the time, I didn't know about like all this sort of extracurricular stuff. And he was all wound up, if you will. He jumped between the seats. He's like, hey, you fucking Ace that, man. Fucking check out the new guy. Ace just fucking saved our lives. And that was literally how the whole thing started. And then they were calling me Ace Rumbler because I have a baritone, low pitched voice. And it's even worse in the mornings. And I was hitting the rumble string. And so for like a month, it was, where's Rumbler? Where's Ace? Where's Ace Rumbler? Blah, 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 blah. And I showed up to the first day of this tour. We were out with a band called Simple Plan that was really popular at the time. And they literally introduced me, this is our new guitar player, Ace. And I hated it because at the time I hated Kiss. I didn't really get into Kiss until I was in my early 20s when I sort of went backwards as a fan of Alice Cooper. Yeah. And at the time, I think Eric Singer was playing drums for both bands. And I was like, well, I love Alice Cooper. I should probably reinvestigate Kiss, because I only thought of them as like, let's put the X in sex. And I was
you got a bum deal.
I got it.
Being so young.
I was a 90s kid.
When the bad Kiss was coming out, right?
Yeah, now I can appreciate.
It's not your fault. Oh, the first like 3, maybe 5 records are fucking.
Oh, I have them.
Yeah, he's got them now.
Now I have.
I know you do, because I know who your friends are.
I hate him to tell you that. No, I love everything through. I mean, I love Dynasty. I really do. Actually.
Oh, me too.
Yeah. What's the Paul song on there? That's the single. Not I Would Made for Loving You.
Sure Know Something.
Sure Know Something. Thank you.
That it?
I think that's a fantastic
great song.
Yeah. Great writer.
Go ahead.
Great songwriter.
Oh yeah, totally.
Period. Yeah.
We just did the Kiss cruise 2 or 3 months ago, and I briefly exchanged with him, but sweet guy, totally sweet guy.
Awesome.
Anyhow, I don't want to talk about Kiss. What was the last?
I was just curious about the origins of your name. So it's basically
so that's where
this car
that's
crash.
where Ace came from, and it stuck. And then Vaughn was it was spelled differently. What was a sort of a nod to my father's side of the family, my grandmother, some German heritage or whatever the fuck. I believe it was spelled VAUGHN something somewhere a couple generations above. But I knew I have a friend of 25 years whose last name is Von Jane, spelled that way. And I was like, well, I don't want to be like too close to that. And so I spelled it VON as an homage to sort of, my father passed when I was a teenager. So sort of a nod to that, and then an homage to Erie Vaughn from Sam Hain and Danzig. Yeah. So wearing the shirt. And so that's kind of where it came from. Also because at 20, my mother was like, oh, I looked up Ace Johnson, and it's like a rapper. It's like a hip hop artist. And I wanted my name to be synonymous with me. So I culled the Vaughn, and here we are, Ace Von Johnson's. I think people, not so much anymore, but for a while, people were like, oh, I saw your name. I thought you were like in the adult entertainment industry or something. Okay. I'm not mad at that either, but I mean, you know.
I would have never thought of that, and now I'll never unhear that.
Well,
man, okay. One more thing real quick, and then we'll let you go. I wanted to talk to you because I know you're a big-time horror movie fan. And yeah, so quickly, your favorite piece of horror memorabilia in your vast collection.
oh, dude, there's no quickly to that.
He does this. He asks questions like that.
Probably, you know, I collect one sheets. There aren't any in this room. This is sort of strictly like nerd and music stuff. But I've got about 30 plus framed in the house, you know, like the theatrical movie posters going all the way back to, I think the earliest piece I have is early 50s. If I had to just pick one, it would be my 1956 Creature Walks Among Us one sheet. I got it. I feel like I ripped the guy off. I think I got it for like $500, and
Whoa.
I'm sure it's worth a lot more than that. But the unique thing about it is it's hand cut, so it's almost got a 3D effect to it. When you get close, you can see that the paper, the edges are kind of peeling up. It's not just a poster. And then I would follow that up with, because I can't give you one strict answer. My second piece would be, I have a 1959 French Grand, House on Haunted Hill French Grand. That's about 5.5 feet tall. It's about almost as big as me, in my hall going down the stairs here. And that's just a big deal to me because that was my father's favorite film. He actually lived in the Los Angeles area in the neighborhood as the director, William Castle. And apparently, I can't ask to confirm because both my father and the director are long since gone. But apparently, my dad used to tell me and my older sister that he would have all the neighborhood kids over and he would show his films to the neighborhood kids before they came out. And so legend has it, my dad saw House on Haunted Hill as a little, like 8-9 years old or whatever, 59. So he was like 11. With all the neighborhood kids before it came out, it scared the shit out of him. So when I was 8-9 years old, he made me watch this movie, which, you know, of course, all the black and whites by today's standards aren't really scary, but I was fascinated with it. I grew up fascinated with it, and I love that movie. So that's why that's important to me. Third piece, and I'm going to stop it there, is I have a pin, not from a film, but a pin from, and I say this, you know, get the bucket because I tend to drop names, but so Doug Bradley, who played Pinhead in all the original Hellraiser films, or most of them, if you will, has become a friend of mine over the years. Actually, there's a piece of art right there that I'm pointing at. It's a mixed media piece that his wife made me. It's a little like evil nun. Maybe I'll pull it off the shelf, but that's not it. He did his first convention appearance in costume as Pinhead, and the woman doing the festival used to manage me and tour managed Pussycat, and she tour managed like Overkill and all these bands in the 90s, and was one of my best friends. And so he had us come in to this photo op that was in like a room, and it was, you know, they had smoke, and you walked in and the lament configuration was there. You're like in the mood, and you touch it, and then he comes out of the shadows, and they take the picture, and you scare the shit out of you. Awesome. And so obviously with us, he was like, Gina and Ace, it's so great to see you. And then at the end, he gave me one of the pins. So I still have it. And it's not like it was in a movie or anything, but to me, it was just a really cool, unique thing as a fan of that franchise. Yeah. And you know, I like one of a kind stuff. And so there you go. It's my top 3. Absolutely. Although I'm sure tomorrow it'll change.
Nice. So in your frame there, I see the letters LOFF. That's Karloff.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's this beautiful, I guess you call it a tapestry, and it is the Bride of Frankenstein artwork as a throw blanket, and I've had it for very, very long. And it used to be flipped over the other way, where you could see the monster, the Bride of Frankenstein and the monster, or whatever you would call them, yeah. Frankenstein's monster together. But the dogs over the last several years, their collars have started to wear through the threading, so it's starting to disintegrate.
So that's not your blanket anymore.
There is nothing in this house that's soft. That's mine. The couch is the dogs, the bed's the dogs, the pillows are the dogs.
So about the few pieces that you mentioned, which sound amazing.
Yeah.
I wonder if Kirk Hammett has any of those.
Kirk, man, it just occurred to me about a month ago that Kirk has a Twitter page for his, his like Kirk Von Hammett thing,
right?
And with all his one sheets and everything, and this is so like social media nonsense, but it like that account follows like 100 people, and I realized I was like, he follows me. I was like, that's fucking cool. I don't know.
That's one of those things like Kirk is like, oh, this guy knows what's up. Click.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. I mean, I've been collecting the one sheets. I'm looking down my hall here upstairs, and there's about 12 of them here. I'd like to think I know what I'm talking about, and it's a really niche thing because not only are they few and far between and pretty rare, some of them can be really pricey, and then also, let's be honest, man, framing these things is like half the battle too. Like I probably have like 5 figures worth of just shit, not the art itself, but the frames. Like sometimes I've like the House on Haunted Hill thing I hung on to for years. I was like, I can't afford to frame this. It's 6 feet tall.
Right.
So a lot of it is that, but it was a nice little moment to realize that was a thing. But yeah, I mean, Kirk is sort of the top of the heap as far as stuff. Actually, Corey Taylor collects a little bit too. He and I found out after the fact, as we're acquainted or buddies or friends, or whatever you want to call it. Again, bucket name. And it turned out that he had outbid me on a Creature from the Black Lagoon piece at one point that I was like, God darn it. And then of course now I have it my own, but I was like, I was in one of his videos at a certain point a couple years ago, and I was like, hey, you still have that Creature 3D one sheet? And he was like, oh yeah. And I was like, I was bidding against you on that. And then we had a nerd chat about that. But I mean, I could keep you for another hour just talking about this stuff. I mean, that's
well, we can do a part 2.
Yeah, we should do another one sometime.
Part 2 down the road.
We didn't even get into your dogs and your pit bull advocacy and that sort of thing. I wanted to close real quick with a quick game of rapid fire. I'm going to ask you 3 quick questions. You just spit out an answer, no explanation needed. All right. Favorite Misfits album?
Walk Among Us.
Favorite Danzig album?
1.
Favorite Sam Hain?
I mean, there's really only 2.
Right. So you 50-50 chance.
Today it's November Coming Fire.
All right. Fair enough. All right, man. Listen, we appreciate it so much. Tell us when we might expect the LA Guns record, Black Diamonds. Do we have a release date yet?
I believe it's either April 14th or 15th. I can't remember the exact date, but it's that weekend, mid-April.
Right.
And dates to follow.
Close to my birthday. Right. That'll be my birthday present. Man, Ace, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a great conversation. I mean, we could go on forever, but we'll let you go, and maybe we'll see you on the road when the new album comes out. On behalf of my co-host, Jason McMaster, I'm Metal Dave, along with our special guest today, Ace Von Johnson from LA Guns on the Talk Louder podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys.